All right, today we're going to dive into the story of the Hindu temple. And let me tell you, it's a journey that is way more surprising and dynamic than you probably think. So let's get right into it.
Just for a second, close your eyes and picture 1. What's the first image that pops into your head? For most of us, it's a pretty specific picture, right?
Yeah, you're probably picturing these absolutely magnificent ancient stone structures covered in carvings, looking like they've been frozen in time for thousands of years. But that's exactly where our story takes a really fascinating turn.
What if I told you that the very first places of Hindu worship weren't buildings at all, that they were just the living, breathing world itself? That's the incredible reality we're going to explore, and it completely changes how we look at this iconic institution.
So let's hit rewind. We're going way, way back, long before a single stone was ever laid for a temple. Our story actually starts not with architecture, but with animism. So the first thing we have to do is bust a pretty common myth, this idea that Hindu temples are 5,000 years old. The truth is, the archaeological evidence tells a totally different story. The grand structures we know today, they're much, much younger. The earliest forms of worship were something else entirely. You see, instead of buildings, the divine was found, well, everywhere. Sacred trees like the peepal weren't just seen as wood and leaves, they were a pulsing life force. Rivers like the Ganga weren't just water, they were a purifying mother. The Himalayas? That was literally the home of the gods. Animals, even specific rocks, all of these were revered as sacred.
This quote right here just nails it. Early Vedic rituals, like the fire sacrifices known as yajna, they all happened out in the open. The gods were thought of as cosmic forces, not figures that you needed to put inside a building. In that worldview, the entire world was the temple.
So, if there were no idols, no statues, how on earth did we get from worshiping a river to the detailed sculptures we see today? Well, this was a massive, revolutionary shift, and it happened in a very specific time and place. Around 2,000 years ago, things really started to change. Down in the artistic hub of Mathura, under the Kushan Empire, artists began to give the gods a human-like form for the very first time. By about 200 CE, these sculptures started to look like the deities we recognize today. But get this, they weren't in temples yet. They were placed in sacred groves, which is such a beautiful bridge from pure nature worship to image worship. And the magic ingredient behind this whole revolution was this concept called syncretism. The Kushan Empire was a true cultural crossroads, a real melting pot. So you had Indian ideas bumping up against Greek realism, Zoroastrian royal styles, and Scythian designs. This mix didn't just create a new style of art, it literally created a new way of seeing the divine. You can literally see this cultural blend on Kushan coins. They're like these tiny historical documents. You see the god Uwasho, who is a form of Shiva, with his classic Indian bull, Nandi, but he's holding a trident and standing in a pose that's borrowed directly from the Greek god Poseidon. You have Lakshmi holding a Greek cornucopia, and Vishnu taking on a regal stance that's straight out of Zoroastrian art. It's fascinating. Now, this wasn't just about art. This was a profound religious revolution. The abstract forces of the Vedas were transforming into personal gods, with stories and personalities. This change totally opened the door for a powerful new kind of worship, personal devotion, or bhakti, and that incredibly intimate experience of darshan, the act of seeing and being seen by a divine image. Okay, so the gods finally have a face. Now what? Well, they're going to need a home. This brings us to the next incredible phase, the birth of classical temple architecture. This whole evolution was gradual but absolutely spectacular. Around 500 CE, you start to see simple structures being built just to enclose these new images. Then comes this unbelievable leap. Architects began literally carving entire temples out of mountains. From there, they moved to building them from the ground up, stone by stone, and that's when you get this explosion of diverse regional styles. But here's what's so cool. These early temples weren't just buildings. They were symbolic universes made of stone. That soaring tower, the Shikhara, that was a man-made Mount Kailash, Shiva's cosmic mountain. And the carvings of river goddesses at the entrance, they weren't just decoration. They symbolized purification, cleansing you before you stepped into that sacred space. To really get your head around the sheer ambition of this era, just look at this number, 200,000 tons. Seriously, Let that sink in for a moment. That's how much rock was painstakingly carved away, from the top down out of a single solid cliff, to create the Kailasanath Temple at Ellora. This wasn't built, it was revealed. It's a mountain that was turned into a massive sculpture.
So, by the 10th century, you have two dominant, magnificent styles. In the north, you have the Nagara style, with its tall, gracefully curving towers. And down south, you have the Dravida style, defined by these grand, stepped pyramids called vimanas. This diversification really marks the golden age of temple architecture.
But the story doesn't just stop with architecture. The temple's role in society itself was about to go through another massive change, one that was driven by the people and forged in the fire of some pretty huge historical challenges. See, early on, a lot of temples were these kind of exclusive, esoteric centers for priests, almost like ritual laboratories. But starting around the 12th century, the Bhakti movement comes along and just blows the doors wide open. It democratized worship, turning temples into vibrant community hubs filled with public singing, dancing, and poetry. This period was also one of incredible turmoil, but the tradition proved to be unbelievably resilient. So how did it survive? Through constant adaptation. Even after devastating raids, construction of new temples continued. People found new ways to worship. They created portable metal idols to bring into their homes for safety, or even disguised entire temples as mansions. Over in Bengal, they used local terracotta when stone wasn't available. And, so crucially, there were these massive waves of rebuilding, led by amazing figures like the Maratha queen Ahilyabai Holkar. And this legacy of resilience is just staggering. People like Ahilyabai Holkar, who rebuilt over 40 major temples in the 18th century, represent this incredible spirit of revival that's continued for hundreds of years. And that spirit helps explain how, today, there are over 2 million functioning Hindu temples across the world. The tradition of building carries on, with modern marvels like Oxardam connecting this long, unbroken chain of faith right into our present day. So, as we wrap this all up, what we're really seeing is a story not of a static, unchanging monument, but of a living, breathing institution that has been in constant motion. I mean, the journey from a sacred tree to a global icon is just extraordinary. The Hindu temple isn't a fossil from an ancient past. It's a dynamic, living story of adaptation, resilience, and an enduring faith that has always found new ways to express itself. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We've seen an institution that thrived, not by staying frozen in time, but by blending with other cultures, by innovating its art, and by weathering incredible storms. So what does this amazing journey of transformation teach us about the very nature of faith and tradition itself?